Betty, I think we could probably move on to, what shall I say, prayer partners. We could move on to prayer partners. I know at this point in your life you had somebody who was very influential and who helped you in your parish ministry. You tell us a little bit about that, please.
Yes, I often think of that scripture, one can chase 1,000, but two can chase 10,000. And it's very true if people think about having a prayer partner. But Mary and I don't know how we got together, but we just did and decided that we'd start and meet, and we would pray about issues that my husband had as a clergyman with various things in the parish. So one was the fact that our little burg was having its first addition, what do you call the little groups of houses that spring up like mushrooms, a little subdivision. And these women were beginning to weigh Tom down with needy, being alone and having a baby and not being able to get out in those days. They stayed home with their babies. So Marion and I prayed about that, and gradually things began to come into view, and another woman wanted to think in terms of a take-a-break. So great, I said, I think it's wonderful, we'd love to help, and we wanted though that it should be body, mind, and spirit, because we're a Trinity and we better look after each of those areas. So the time was divvied into those three things, even for the children out in another room. And they had to do physical exercise for the first part. Then they would have a speaker of some sort, often a government person because they were already paid. And spirit, then we would have the opportunity to share something lively about the gospel. And that's what we did there. Further down the line, we got to go to Singing Waters, and we did this because Archdeacon Alan Reed had this lady come to his place when he invited us to dinner with the clergy wives. What a treat to get out. And anyway, I thought, who is this little lady? I'm very tired. And when she started to speak, I was no longer tired. I couldn't believe her. She'd had a miraculous life out of terrible disease, and now she's running this retreat center. So I started to get one or two clergy wives to go with me over to the retreat center and hear Kay's amazing story. Then more and more women would go over there, and we enjoyed that very, very much. So then we, I guess, started a seniors group.
Yes.
I noticed that there were older women whose groups had dried up for lack of leadership, and they didn't seem to have a spot to go anymore, and yet they had some marvelous skills that the rest of us needed. So we started a little group called Community Corner for them.
Okay.
And that was a long time ago now, but the intention was just to have fellowship. My friend asked the people from the local home for people who were freed from Whitby, the psychiatric wards. And I thought, she did what? But anyway, it worked out beautiful with our very British ladies. And they began to get their skills going together. And over the years now, that group has produced lots of things for people like the Children's Aid Society or anything like that. Thousands of dollars for the church over the years, and who knows, that wasn't intended even.
Since you mentioned that, I thought maybe you were talking about a group of people who were kind of drifting.
Yes.
They were kind of drifting because
Yes.
their organizations had died one way or another.
Right.
On the other end of the spectrum, there was also a group of people who were drifting. I know that at one point you had a group of young kids from the local community who had no place to go, used to hang out on the church steps, and frankly, probably they were perceived as being an incredible threat. Could you tell us a little bit how that all worked out?
Again, Marion and I prayed about it because we didn't know what to do about it. What do you do with these kids? Anyway, bit by bit, a Friday night drop-in emerged, and we started there, and we found a couple of married couples who were quite willing to come along and assist. I ended up in the badminton room, and there were so many kids that we had to change the court every 15 minutes to allow all of them to play. Another room had floor hockey. Another lady with her skills helped the girls to bake something very simple, which they sold to the rest of the kids. And her husband, in turn, brought his skills, and he could hook rugs just with burlap and old rags, and he taught them all sorts of things. So it was wonderful the way people, and there ended up being almost 100 of those kids.
My goodness.
And it was really rewarding, although tiring. Yes.
It's going to be
But
that
it's
way
worth
when you work with
It's
kids
worth
and they go from being a threat to being an asset. What a wonderful
Yes.
idea.
Yes.
There's one last little thing that I would like to just kind of dig into a little bit. There was a fellow called Lyman Coleman.
Yes.
That kind of had a big influence on how things went for you.
He had the beautiful idea of teaching spiritual things with a lot of fun, but catching you like on a slippery slide with things that you're really interested in, whether it's men, it might be cars, or it's kids, it's the latest music or whatever. So it was called Serendipity, and I used those placemats that had all these questions on them. For instance, if we had a worship concert on a Sunday night and had a meal beforehand, and you put this down, and the kids would all get interested in those first few questions, little knowing that down the way it was going to get even more interesting. And that was a wonderful way to reach people.
I do know that this is a bit like dangling a lure.
Yes, it
It's
was.
a bit like dangling a lure in front of people, and this must have appealed really to Tom.
Yes.
He being
Yes.
such a fisherman.
Yeah,
And there was Tom fishing for people.
that's right. He wore a lapel pin that was a hook. One of them even was a fly fisherman's hook. And people would often say, "What's that for?" And he'd say, "Well, that's fishing for fish or fishing for men." Sometimes that stopped it cold, and sometimes they really went after it.
Yeah, sure. That's exactly how it would happen.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you for that. Thank you, Betty.